My phone lit up with an unknown number, and I almost let it die like everything else from that era. Then a trembling voice said, "Ethan, it's Rachel." And the wound I'd sealed years ago opened without permission. The office was quiet in the way expensive buildings get quiet after hours. No footsteps, no chatter, just HVAC and the soft scratch of my pen moving across paper. Blueprints covered my desk like a controlled mess. Lines, angles, load paths, things that obeyed rules. Things that held if you built them right. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. I didn't know strangers my time. I didn't know the past anything. It buzzed again. Same number. Persistent. That was either a problem or someone who didn't know when to quit. I answered without warmth. "Yeah." Silence for half a beat. Then a breath. Small, shaky. Familiar in a way I hated. "Ethan, it's Rachel." My hand didn't move, but my grip tightened. I felt it in my forearm like a cable going taut. I didn't say her name. Names give people space. "Why are you calling me?" Another breath, like she was bracing for impact. "I know I shouldn't. I know you don't want to hear me." "That's correct. I'm not calling about us," she said quickly, like speed could outrun guilt. This isn't an apology call." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the glass wall of my office. My reflection looked the same as always. Composed, clean, untouchable. A man who learned to keep his face neutral because the world loves a reaction. "Then say what you called to say," I told her. "You've got 10 seconds before I hang up." Her voice dropped. "It's about Dylan." That name still had weight. Not heartbreak weight. Structural failure weight. Partner who smiled while he stole. A friend who looked me in the eye and lied with practice. I didn't react. I made my voice a flat line. "Dylan isn't my problem anymore." "He is," she said, and the tremble turned into something sharper. Fear that wasn't performative. "Ethan, please. I need 30 minutes. In a public place. Somewhere busy." I watched my own hand tap once against the desk. An old habit, a metronome for patience. 30 minutes for what? "What I'm going to tell you. It isn't about what happened between us." Her words came carefully, like she was stepping around glass. "It's about what he did, and what he's still doing." I didn't like the way that landed. Not because I cared about Dylan, because I cared about control. And that sentence didn't have any. "Rachel," I said, calm enough to be cold. "You don't get to pull me back into your chaos." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm asking instead of showing up. Please, just 30 minutes. If you think it's nothing, you walk away and I never call again." My eyes went back to the blueprint in front of me. Clean lines pretending the world was simple. I'd rebuilt my life with that same lie. If I designed it right, nothing could breach it. Fear in her voice didn't sound like manipulation. It sounded like someone who'd been cornered for a long time. 2 days, I said. "Downtown. I choose the place." "Okay," she breathed, like I'd handed her air. "Okay. Thank you." "Don't," I warned. "This isn't forgiveness. This is logistics." "I understand." I ended the call and sat still, listening to the office hum. My life had been quiet on purpose. And now the past had my number. I picked the cafe the way I picked a site for a building. Sightlines, exits, foot traffic, cameras. I wanted witnesses and noise. Something between me and whatever story she'd brought. 2 days later, I walked in exactly on time. The place was busy in a controlled way. Laptops, cups clinking, a line at the counter, conversations overlapping into a single blur. Nobody here cared who I was. Perfect. Rachel was already there, back corner, half hidden like she tried to make herself smaller than the space allowed. She'd chosen a table tight against the wall. One side boxed in, one side open. Defensive. She looked different. Not in a dramatic, movie-sad way. In a real way. Thinner. Paler. Hair pulled back with zero vanity. Dark shadows under her eyes like sleep had stopped working. Her hands stayed close to her cup, fingers wrapped tight like it was the only warm thing left. I didn't greet her like an old friend. I didn't smile. I slid into the chair across from her and kept my posture straight, shoulders squared, face blank. You asked for 30 minutes, I said. You have them. She swallowed, eyes flicking to the door, then back to me. You really came. I said I would. Her mouth tightened, like she knew she didn't deserve that much. Thank you. Don't. I set my phone on the table, face up, screen dark. A timer without theatrics. Start talking. Rachel's gaze dropped to the table edge. She kept the table between us like it was a border she couldn't cross. Not to protect herself from me. More like she was afraid I'd disappear if she moved wrong. I'm not here to get you back, she said. I'm not here to ask for anything. You've said that. She nodded once. The movement looked heavy. I've been holding this for a long time. I watched her carefully, not for tears. Rachel could cry when she wanted to. I watched for the microsigns. Breath control, eye movement, the cadence of someone lying versus someone trying to survive. This wasn't a performance. This was pressure. You called it what Dylan did, I said. Not what you did. That's interesting. Flinch. Small, immediate. I know what I did, she said quietly. I'm not dodging it. Good. She took a breath and forced herself to meet my eyes. The day you walked in, it wasn't just betrayal. My jaw stayed still. My pulse didn't. Careful. I'm being careful. Her voice lowered. Because I didn't understand it then. I didn't even have the words for it. But I understand it now. I didn't speak. I let the silence do what it does. Make people fill it with truth. Rachel's hands tightened around the cup. That day wasn't just an affair. My stare didn't move. Then what was it? She hesitated, and for a second I saw the old Rachel. Someone who wanted to control the narrative. Then it cracked, and what came through was smaller, rawer. It was surveillance, she said. The word hit wrong, like a tool placed on the table that didn't belong in the room. I blinked once. That was it. Explain, I said. Rachel's eyes drifted to the cafe around us. People laughing, a barista calling names, someone dragging a chair. Normal life. She looked like she was borrowing it for cover. Dylan didn't just sleep with me, she said, voice tight. He was watching, recording, planning. My spine went rigid without me choosing it. You're telling me he was spying on us? She nodded, almost imperceptible. I'm telling you the day you caught us wasn't the beginning of the worst part. I stared at her, measuring every word like it was a beam I didn't trust. My timer sat between us, silent. 30 minutes. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't here for closure. I was here because something bigger had been built inside my old life, hidden, illegal, and load-bearing. And Rachel had finally found the nerve to show me where it was buried. Rachel reached into her bag like it weighed 100 pounds. She didn't rummage. She didn't hesitate, like she'd rehearsed this 1,000 times and still hated every second of it. She slid an envelope across the table. Plain, unmarked, thick enough to matter. I didn't touch it right away. I looked at her hands instead. Knuckles pale, fingers tight. The slight tremor she couldn't fully control. What is this? I asked. Proof, she said. Not stories. Not feelings. Proof. I kept my voice level. Proof of what, Rachel? Her throat moved as she swallowed. Dylan installed recording devices. Hidden ones. Without consent. The word consent landed with a sick kind of precision. In our house? I asked. Her eyes flinched, then held. In the bedroom you thought was private. And, not just there. Something cold slid behind my ribs. Don't panic. Not a shock. A structural shift. Like realizing the foundation you trusted was poured on sand. I opened the envelope and pulled out the stack. Printouts first. Messages. Screenshots. A thread of threats written with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never been challenged. Dates, amounts, accounts. I didn't let my face change, but my focus narrowed until the cafe noise turned into static. Rachel spoke low, like she was afraid the words would carry. He'd show me stills, angles. He'd describe what he had, what he could send. My eyes tracked a bank transfer page. Payment. Then another. Then another, spaced out like a subscription. You paid him, I said. Yes. No excuses. Just the word. I turned a page. A screenshot showing a room corner, familiar crown molding, the edge of a closet door. An angle too high to be a phone left on a nightstand. It wasn't a memory anymore. It was geometry. I felt my jaw tighten once, then lock back down. How long? Rachel's voice went thinner. 4 years. 4 years. I heard it like a sentence. And you never went to the police. I was scared, she said. Not of him, of what he'd do with it. To me, to my parents, to my job. Her eyes flicked up, then down again. And I thought if I kept paying, it would end. It never ends, I said. She nodded like she'd learned that the hard way. It didn't. It evolved. I flipped through more pages. Another message thread. Dylan demanded money with a deadline. Dylan mentioned names, her mother, her boss, like he'd already mapped her life. My anger didn't spike. It sharpened. The old betrayal, the image I'd carried for years, had always felt ugly, but simple. 2 people in a bed, a door opening, my life splitting. I'd rebuilt around that like it was the whole truth. But this rearranged reality. It explained the weird aftershocks. The paranoia that showed up in places it didn't belong. The way certain moments had felt staged, like I'd been in a room with an unseen audience. I set the stack down with care, the way you set down something contaminated. Rachel's voice cracked, then steadied. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I didn't look at her. I stared at the printouts like they were blueprints to a hidden structure inside my past. You let him in, I said quietly. I did, she whispered. And I'll carry that. But Ethan, once he had it, it wasn't an affair anymore. It was a trap. He built it around all of us. I lifted my eyes to hers. Her fear was real. Her shame was real. So was my clarity. And in that clarity, one thing was obvious. Dylan Cole hadn't just betrayed me. He'd been collecting people. I kept reading, and the story stopped being about Rachel. Names showed up that didn't belong to her. Different accounts. Different payment apps. Different email addresses. The kind of variety you don't get from a one-time mistake. The kind you get from a system. I tapped one page with my knuckle. Who are they? Rachel's eyes didn't want to look, but she forced them down. Other women. How many? She exhaled like the number tasted bad. At least 6 I can identify. There are more I can't. The cafe felt louder for a second. Espresso machine hissing, chairs scraping, a laugh too sharp. Normal life, oblivious. Dylan met them through a gym, she said. He worked there on weekends. He'd flirt, be charming, make it feel casual. Then he'd get invited to a house, a barbecue, a dinner, a quick stop by. My stomach stayed calm. My mind didn't. It started building a map. Social access, I said. Rachel nodded. He'd find a reason to be alone for a minute. Bathroom. Phone call. Forgot something in the car. Her voice tightened. And then he'd place a device. I stared at the paper in front of me, but I was seeing something else now. Dylan moving through homes like he owned them, smiling while he planted a hook. And after, I asked. After he'd wait, she said. Or he'd push it. He'd send a screenshot of a corner of a room. Something only they'd recognize. Then he'd demand money. Or favors. Or silence. I didn't like the word favors. I didn't ask her to unpack it. I didn't need the details to understand the shape of it. He used shame, she added. Like a leash. I looked up. You're telling me he turned private mistakes into a pipeline. Rachel's mouth tightened. Yes. My fingers slid to another page, an account ledger. Names, dates, amounts. Clean columns like he thought he was running a legitimate business. Predator with spreadsheets. Rachel's eyes glossed, not with tears, more like exhaustion trying to drown her. One of them, Patricia, she broke. Like really broke. Hospital. Months of treatment. She swallowed hard. Dylan told her it was her fault. That nobody would believe her. My jaw set. Controlled. Quiet. For years, I'd filed my divorce under personal tragedy. Something I survived, something I outworked, something I buried under new projects and clean routines. Now I saw it for what it was: collateral damage. I wasn't the only target. I was just the first one who noticed there was a machine running in the walls. Rachel reached into her bag again and set a flash drive on the table like it was heavier than it looked. Black plastic. Small. The kind of thing that can ruin a life without making a sound. I didn't come here empty, she said. I talked to a cybercrimes attorney. Not the police yet. The lawyer told me to preserve everything. Keep it clean. Don't contaminate it with panic. I didn't touch the drive. Not yet. What's on it? Emails. Screenshots. A few audio recordings of his threats. She kept her voice low. Payment logs. Some of the metadata. And names. I watched her closely. You're telling me you've been building a case. Her mouth tightened. I've been trying to survive. Building a case came later. The honesty was ugly, but it was straight. She slid the drive a half-inch closer, then stopped, like she didn't want her fingers anywhere near it anymore. 2 women are willing to talk if they feel protected. One's a doctor. One's a corporate attorney. They're not weak, Ethan. They're just isolated. He made sure of that. I looked at the drive, then back at her. Why bring it to me? Rachel's eyes stayed on the table edge. Because Dylan respects you. That hit like a bad joke, except her face didn't treat it like one. He always did, she continued. Even when he was doing what he was doing, he'd talk about you like you were the standard, the guy who'd actually do something if you found out. I let out a slow breath through my nose. Not anger, not relief, just the ugly recognition of how predators measure people. You think if I move, I said, others will feel safe. She nodded once. Yes, if you go first, it stops being their shame and becomes what it is, his crime. The cafe noise kept rolling around us, steady and dumb. People living normal lives while a man like Dylan built traps in the dark. I felt 2 urges pull in opposite directions. 1. Stand up, walk out, and never let any of this touch my life again. Keep my rebuilt world sealed. 2. Do what I've always done when something is rotten inside a structure. Trace it, expose it, and take it apart without collapsing the people still inside. I looked at the drive again. Have you given this to anyone else? I asked. No, she said. Only the attorney. They told me to keep the original and make copies. Chain of custody. Good. Smart. Fear can make people reckless. This wasn't reckless. I finally picked up the flash drive between 2 fingers, like it might burn. I didn't pocket it. I just held it long enough to decide what kind of man I was going to be next. I'm not doing this out loud, I said. No stunts. No threats. No amateur hero acts. Rachel's eyes lifted, cautious hope fighting shame. I'll verify everything, I continued, through my own lawyer. We do this clean. Preserve evidence, protect witnesses, and involve cybercrimes the right way. She swallowed. You'll help. I'll do it correctly, I said. That's not the same thing. Her shoulders dropped a fraction, like she'd been holding them up for years. My phone timer buzzed once, 30 minutes. I stood. We're done here. Rachel looked up fast. Ethan. I held up a hand. Flat. A stop sign. This doesn't fix us. I know, she said quietly. I nodded once, then turned to leave. Revenge would have been easy, but justice? Justice was paperwork done right, and I was built for that. I didn't plug the flash drive into my office computer. That's how amateurs ruin cases. I took it straight to a digital crimes attorney with a reputation for being boring in the right ways: chain of custody boring, court admissible boring. The kind of boring that puts bad people in cages. We worked in a windowless conference room with a printer that never stopped and a legal pad that filled up fast. First step, copies. Verified hashes. Time-stamped notes. Everything preserved like it would be attacked in court, because it would. Then we went through the contents. Emails with Dylan's casual cruelty. Payment demands dressed up like agreements. Audio clips where his voice stayed calm while he threatened people's lives with public exposure. He spoke like a man ordering lunch. The lawyer traced transfers and mapped timelines. I watched the pattern appear. Steady, methodical, repeatable. A scheme built to scale. Once the evidence had bones, the harder work started. Calls. Not to cops yet. Not until I knew who I was pulling into this. A file doesn't shake when it hears a name. People do. The first number belonged to Dr. Patricia Hayes. When she answered, her voice was professional by reflex. "This is Dr. Hayes." "This is Ethan Parker," I said. "You don't know me. I'm calling about Dylan Cole." Silence. Not the awkward kind. The kind where the air leaves the room. Then a small sound. Like she'd covered the receiver and tried to breathe without me hearing it. "Who gave you my number?" she asked. "A woman named Rachel Parker. My ex-wife." Another pause. Then her voice went thin. "I told her not to say my name." "I'm not calling to pressure you," I said. "I'm calling because I have evidence. And I'm building a case with counsel. If you want to stay out, you can. If you want to be protected and heard, that's on the table." I heard her inhale, shaky, and then she broke. Not loud, not dramatic. Just the sound of someone trying to hold it together and failing for a second. "He ruined my life," she said, barely audible. "I know," I replied. "And you weren't the only one." That sentence mattered. I could feel it land. She didn't cry after that. She steadied. Doctors know how to compartmentalize pain when they have to. "Send it to my attorney," she said. "If it's real, I'll talk." "It's real," I told her. "But we'll do it right." The second call was Lauren Bennett, corporate attorney. Different kinds of strength. She answered, clipped. "Lauren." I introduced myself the same way. Said Dylan's name. She didn't break. She went quiet, dangerous quiet like a judge listening. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Truth," I said. "On record. If you're willing." A pause. "If you're lying, I bury you," she said evenly. "Fair." "I'm not lying," I replied. "If the evidence holds up the way it looks, will you testify?" She exhaled once. "If it's real, yes." When I ended those calls, I sat in my office and stared at the wall longer than I should have. I realized Dylan's power was never just the cameras. Cameras are hardware. Threats are words. His real weapon was isolation. Convincing each woman she was alone, unprotected, and too ashamed to reach for help. For years, I'd carried a different kind of isolation. The private shame of missing signs. Of being the guy who didn't see betrayal until it was in his face. Now that shame started to change shape. Not into forgiveness. Not into softness. Into clarity. Because the truth was simple. Dylan didn't win because he was smarter. He won because nobody compared notes. And I was done letting him operate in the gaps. Once the statements were signed and the evidence was packaged clean, my lawyer made the handoff to cybercrimes the way you're supposed to. No shortcuts, no hero moves, no dirty surprises a defense attorney could exploit. A detective met us in a plain office with fluorescent lights and tired eyes. He didn't look impressed by anything. That was good. He listened, asked the right questions, and when he saw the metadata and the payment trails line up, his tone changed from polite to purposeful. "Warrants don't happen because you're angry. They happen because you're precise." A week later, the detective called me. "We're executing," he said. "No drama. Just a fact. I wasn't there. I didn't ask to be. I didn't want a front row seat to anything that could be spun as personal revenge. I wanted distance. Clean lines. Process. But I still pictured it. Dylan's house. Doors opening under authority he couldn't charm. Drawers pulled out. Devices unplugged. Drives bagged and labeled. Every object treated like it mattered because it did. Later, I got the summary, recording equipment, storage units, a digital archive organized like a client database, folders labeled with names, dates, and amounts paid. That detail sat in my chest like a cold stone. Predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like men who file things neatly. 2 days after that, I saw it in the news. Dylan Cole, taken into custody at the gym. The footage was short. Him stepping out, trying to smile, realizing no one was smiling back. cuffs, a squad car, phones up around him, people filming the fall of a man they thought they knew. I watched it once. Then I shut my laptop. I expected satisfaction. I expected heat. What I felt was quieter. Relief, strange and clean. Like finally finding the source of a leak that had been blamed on the whole house for years. It wasn't triumph. It was a frame around chaos. And for the first time since that day long ago, the past stopped feeling like a shadow and started looking like evidence. The case moved faster than I expected, not because the system suddenly cared, but because Dylan left a trail like he thought he was untouchable. Digital evidence doesn't forget. Payment records don't get nervous. Metadata doesn't care how charming you are. He pleaded not guilty anyway. Of course he did. In court, he wore the costume. Clean shirt, careful hair, the calm face of a man trying to look reasonable. He sat beside his attorney like he belonged there, like this was a misunderstanding that would collapse if everyone would just stop being dramatic. His defense was simple. The payments were gifts. The women were willing. Everyone wanted it until they didn't. Old strategy. Blame the victims. Blur the lines. Force shame back into the room and hope it does his work for him. Didn't. Patricia testified first. She didn't shake. She didn't oversell it. She spoke in controlled detail, what he did, what he threatened, how the money started, how it escalated. She described the pressure like a vice tightening one click at a time. The room changed while she spoke. Not because she begged for sympathy, because she didn't. Then Lauren took the stand and did what corporate attorneys do. She organized the chaos into facts, dates, messages, transfers. She left Dylan's excuses lying on the floor in plain sight. By the time Rachel was called, the courtroom already understood what this was. Rachel walked up like she was carrying weight on her shoulders that didn't belong to anyone else. She took the oath, sat, and kept her eyes forward. She didn't look at Dylan, and she didn't look at me. She spoke about 4 years of threats. Panic that didn't stop at daylight, the constant calculations, the payments she kept making because she believed the next one might be the last. She didn't ask to be forgiven. She didn't try to make herself the hero. She owned what she started, and she named what he turned it into. I sat in the back the whole time, neither her supporter nor her enemy, just a witness to consequences. A man watching a chain reaction play out in public where it belonged. When Dylan's attorney tried to imply the women wanted it, Patricia didn't argue. She just repeated the truth calmly, and the implication died under its own ugliness. When they tried to paint the payments as willing, Lauren pointed to the threats, the deadlines, the escalation, the way coercion shows up when you stop pretending. Dylan didn't crack. He didn't shout. He just shrank a little each day, like daylight was a pressure he wasn't built for. The verdict came without theatrics. Guilty. Multiple counts, extortion and privacy-related crimes that matched the evidence too cleanly to spin. The judge's tone stayed flat when the sentence was read, like even the court refused to give Dylan the satisfaction of drama. A long prison term, restitution ordered. The money part felt symbolic compared to the damage. You can't refund years. You can't reimburse a nervous system. But accountability? That part was real. And when the gavel came down, it sounded less like victory and more like a door finally closing. After the trial, I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything. I didn't take victory laps. I just cleaned the house. The old firm, what was left of it, got dissolved the right way. Contracts finished, accounts closed, loose ends tied off. I rebuilt under a new name not because I was running, but because I refused to let Dylan's shadow sit on my letterhead. New signage, new filings, new brand, same hands, same standards. Months later, a letter showed up in my mailbox with no return address. I recognized the handwriting before I fully accepted that it existed in my world again. Rachel. I read it standing up. I didn't sit for it. She wrote that she was in therapy, living somewhere new, working a job that didn't require a polished smile every day. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't mention us like there was still an us to negotiate. She acknowledged one thing, that I'd taken a private disaster and turned it into protection for other people. That was it. No poetry, no plea. I folded the letter and set it in a drawer I rarely opened. I didn't write back. Closure doesn't always need dialogue. Sometimes it needs boundaries that stay intact. Life kept moving. Then an art event came up. One of those nights where donors pretended to understand design and architects pretended to enjoy small talk. I was presenting a museum project, the kind of work that outlives the noise. Clean lines, honest materials. Light is used like a tool. That's where I met Olivia Carter. Curator, sharp eyes, calm voice, the kind of woman who didn't fill silence out of fear. She asked real questions about the project, why I'd chosen certain sightlines, what emotions the space was meant to hold. She spoke about beauty like it was practical, like it could shelter people. Later, away from the crowd, she asked, "So what pushed you into building this kind of work?" I didn't dump my history on her. I didn't test her. I gave her the truth in broad strokes. Betrayal, a partner turned predator. A case built the right way. A life rebuilt without pretending it never happened. She didn't pity me. She nodded once like she respected the choice. "You handled it," she said. "Most people don't." "No," I answered. "They just let it leak into everything." Olivia held my gaze steady. "And you didn't." I drove home that night in silence. Not the lonely kind, the earned kind. The past didn't vanish. It never does. But I'd redesign it around it. Reinforced the weak points. Exposed the rot. Dismantled what had to be dismantled. And what was left wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. A foundation strong enough to hold a life that finally felt like mine.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.